So the talk today, which is serendipitous because right now in Milan, Italy, they're doing an actual Bitcoin scaling with core devs and everything like that, so that's where they're making the magic happen. I'm going to talk about stuff that's not quite so cutting edge like stuff that's coming out today. This is stuff that's been around for a little bit that's still being worked on, but it's still exciting stuff. And I have to say that as I did more research for this talk, it just got me pumped more and more about the future of Bitcoin because it's been a big issue over the last several years about how Bitcoin, yeah, it works, it's great, it's stable, it does what it's supposed to do, but can it serve, more than a couple million people? Can it serve 1 billion people? Can it serve the whole world as a monetary system? And those questions were absolutely not 2 years ago, so people started really looking into them, and we have some interesting solutions coming up. So, let's get started. Okay. What is scaling and why should we do it? Okay, first of all, scaling is expanding a service to benefit more users. That's what we want to do. In a monetary system specifically, the exchange of value benefits from a network effect. So the more people you have using the system, the more they can exchange with each other, the bigger the system gets, the more valuable it gets for everyone involved. The ideal end state is for cryptocurrency services to be available to all of humanity. So that is billions upon billions of people making trillions upon trillions of transactions, especially if this can fulfill the promise of being a micropayment platform. Then you not only have, how many credit card transactions do you make a day? A couple? How many cash? Maybe a couple, right? To get down to microtransactions, you might have your phone making payments on behalf of you. So we could get up to thousands of transactions per person per day. And that's really the march of all technology, is to make something that happens in increments happen quicker and quicker and quicker, right? To increase the cadence of things and make them smaller, and everything gets more flexible. So that's the goal of all technology generally, and that's the goal of this cryptocurrency scaling. All right, here's some boring stuff we're going to get into, but I promise there'll be good stuff later. So resource scarcity in distributed digital systems. So this is not specific to cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. This is stuff we all deal with, anyone who works in the computer industry or IT industry or design systems. First of all, you have the pieces of the system. You have the function processing, or the CPU. All right, that's what does the work. Short-term memory is the RAM. That's where it stores the results of the work it's done, brings in new results to perform out more calculations on. And we have long-term memory of disk, where it flushes everything out to disk so we can store it later and work on it later, much later. And then you have internode communication, which is network speed and latency. Okay, so back, the mainframe days, this was all it was. Now we're in the internet era, well into it, 20 years, and so it's all about the network too. So you notice something about all of these resources is this happens really fast because the information is acting right next to each other. Moving stuff out to RAM is a little slower because it has to go to a different chip on the board. Moving stuff out to disk, you have to go over a controller to a completely separate subsystem, so it's even slower. So this is why you always want the fastest processor and the most amount of RAM so it doesn't have to go to disk. And when you do have to go to disk, you want the fastest disk that you can get, and ideally the largest one that you can store a lot of data on. And then beyond this is internode communication. If you're talking from one computer to another over a network, that's a whole lot of latency. That's orders of magnitude more than disk, which is orders of magnitude more than RAM. So you see that once you get into a distributed system, fastest, fast, slow, slowest. So it's all about keeping the data close to each other so it can act on it and perform the service faster. So the standard techniques for resource expansion, basically to make the system more performant, the CPU side, you scale up, right? You get a faster CPU. We're constantly making faster CPUs. They're down to 14 nanometer die processes now with CPUs. So they're constantly getting faster. And when you reach the point where you can't buy a faster CPU, you scale out, meaning you buy more CPUs or you go multi-core. So you have more processing units in that die that are talking to each other. And then also software optimizations can virtually make your CPU faster, because if you make the instructions faster or more optimized, obviously, it makes your work faster. For RAM, you add more per node, And when you max out the box with the amount of memory, you have to add more nodes and then connect them through the network. Disk, same thing. You add as much disk as you can, and then you add nodes beyond that. And then the network, to optimize that, you want to use faster links, and you keep the nodes close. In terms of network speed, we have abundant network speed these days. It wasn't like back in 20 years ago when you get a T1 or a fractional T1. It was 1/10 of what a cable modem can deliver today to your home. And that was $1,500 per month, $2,000 per month for a business to pay for that. Now we have lots of fast links, but what we don't have is low latency. All right, low latency is basically just a physical aspect, a physics aspect of the speed of light. Electronic information works at the speed of light, but then you have interconnects between all these different electronic components within the node and then within the network and the relaying equipment, the switching equipment. That all introduces delays, so you have latency. So when you're trying to transmit information to the other side of the world, it can get there really quickly, but the fact you're not constantly spewing information, right? It's a conversation back and forth. So you have to send the information and then wait for the acknowledgement that it got there, then send more and wait for the acknowledgement, and we'll talk a little bit about that more later. So latency is the key part of the networking side. All standard techniques tend towards centralization, okay? But because again, the more work you want done, the closer you have to have the pieces of it together. CPU, the processor limit, leads to more neighbor nodes. Memory, if you limit your memory to your node, it again leads to more networking nodes that are close. Same thing with disk. Network, again, the speed and latency, mostly latency, limit leads to the localization of a neighbor node. So you've heard of computer clusters, right? You cluster computers together, and you want them as close together as possible. You don't even want them on the other side of the city. You want them within the same data center. Okay, so that's a centralization tendency. The ultimate in scalability is a 0-point singularity of infinite processing. So this is kind of, it's never going to happen. It's sort of insane. You talk about people with the singularity. That's not exactly what I'm talking about, but sort of close. Is that this is the tendency of all computer systems. The performance, if you want to up the performance, you're going to have to be like this, infinitely small node where everything is on top of each other and there's no distance to travel between them. Where basically the laws of physics don't apply. Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a networked digital system with a soul. The Bitcoin concept requires decentralization as a buffer against human control. Okay? Well, all computer systems, if you want to make them performant, you have to make everything smaller and centralized. This is a system that requires decentralization as part of its design. Okay? So it's diametrically opposed to fundamental digital system centralization tendency. I promise there'll be more interesting stuff. We'll get through all the text now. All right, delegating and automating the human ideals of self-control, impartiality, equality. That's basically what the Bitcoin blockchain is, right? Or any open blockchain, but mostly the Bitcoin blockchain because it has the most security at this time. So we are imbuing a computer system, a network distributed computer system, with sort of these human ideals. So we can't just make it closer, as close as it can be, because it's got to have decentralization as an aspect. So we have impartiality. So we have equality. So we have self-control within the system. Otherwise, if it's all centralized in one place, people can take it, take control over it, shut it down, modify the ledger. All right. So we need a system of checks and balances. That's what decentralization is all about. Getting a little deep here. Mirrors our own human battle against entropy. We'll talk about that a little, maybe after a little more wine. Okay, Bitcoin centralization tendencies. CPU, it was home mining. Now it's ASIC farms. A lot of people are not mining anymore because it's not productive to. A lot of people do it because they want to support the network, but it's not profitable to. And Bitcoin is all about the market system and being profitable. So ASIC farms have taken over, and now although they're still distributed around the globe, we still have decentralization. It's more difficult to mine out of your home. And we had Rob Tishner talk at our last talk about mining and how it's still possible to mine in this country. Home mining, though, I don't know. If you just want to contribute to the network, sure, but I don't think you're going to make a living off of it. he runs all of his mines out of data centers in Washington State. I think he does have some in Illinois, though, right? Yeah. RAM costs more money. So you have less nodes, more people don't want to spend, there's a certain point at which people don't want to spend money to contribute to the network. Disk, more money, less nodes. Network speed, more money, less nodes. Network latency. That's again, not the speed, that's necessarily the latency. Server farms connected via private low latency relay networks. That's more money. That's something they have right now. It's a private network communicating amongst the big mining farms around the world, which is very low latency. And I believe it's free, but you make donations. I'm not really sure what the agreement is, but it is basically a private high-speed relay network. So what are some optimizations that we can do to Bitcoin to make it anti-centralization? So the CPU, Moore's Law catch-up, and the time to market. This is something that Andreas has been talking about. Andreas Antonopoulos, if anybody is familiar with his work, he's got a new book out, which we're going to do a giveaway a little later. But one of the things he's talking about is the fact that we are finally catching up to Moore's Law in terms of the ASIC processing for the Bitcoin mining chips. Okay, what does that mean? That means for a long time, Bitcoin is just sort of a plaything. It didn't have a lot of money invested into it to make the fastest chips that mine Bitcoin. All right, that's changed over the last couple of years with the design of ASICs and specifically factories in China, which are pumping out faster and faster chips. Now they are down to 16 millimeter, I think, maybe near 14 millimeter, or nanometer, which is the cutting edge process. So what that meant was that in the past 2 years, chips are coming out which are faster and faster and faster, like every couple months. All right. So if you have a faster mining chip, you want to get that online on the Bitcoin network as soon as possible before anybody else gets those chips, because then you can make the money, right? And then when everybody else comes on with the same chips, the difficulty goes up and everybody makes less money. So it was a speed to get these chips on the network. Okay. So basically, China has a lot of the mining power right now because that's where they make the chips. So they don't want to ship a container full of these mining chips to Iceland or America or somewhere overseas where they're going to sit for a month in transit and have to have their papers checked and documents and everything like that. So basically, the best thing to do is not try to sell these chips, but just plug them in close. They fall right off the assembly line into a computer, and you plug it in and you start mining, so you can make that money before the difficulty starts to adjust. That's the whole game theory aspect of it. So now we've caught up to Moore's Law. So that means the speed of these chips, the increases are going to be in line with the rest of the computer industry. So there's not going to be a huge advantage to getting them plugged in as soon as possible, meaning you will be able to ship them overseas to customers, and they won't lose as much money while they're in transit. So that's the time to market. So that is a big centralization tendency over the past couple of years, which is going to become less and less, we hope, based on this. In terms of memory, the UTXO is the unspent transaction output. That's a lot of words that basically mean all the money that's available to be spent within the Bitcoin system. This is basically a table that exists in RAM on the Bitcoin nodes. Okay, you can't put it out to disk because you need it for high-speed lookups to verify transactions. So that's something that we want to make sure that's not something. Disk, blockchain optimization. I don't know how big the blockchain is right now. Is it like 70 gigs or something like that? The Bitcoin blockchain specifically. But there's a lot of interesting work that's going on to make that small, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Network. The biggest component of the network issue and latency is the block size optimization. And this is the big one that's been in the headlines and in discussion for years, is the block size. Right now it's fixed at 1 megabyte for every 10 minutes of transactions. All right. Initially, Gavin Andreessen wanted to make it like 32 megabytes, and they went back to 16, and then 8, and then he's sort of been sidelined now, doing his own thing with Bitcoin Unlimited or Bitcoin Classic, things like that. So basically, there was no real consensus, or the consensus went to, okay, we'll do a hard fork to 2 megabytes. Very conservative. We'll double it. All right. That seemed to be safe. But then, what happened a couple months ago with Ethereum? The DAO. right? So the DAO issue happened, and how many people are familiar with this whole thing? I'm not talking about over everybody's heads with the DAO. Okay, so the Ethereum cryptocurrency had this big contract with the DAO. People lost a lot of money because a hacker stole it, and they decided to hard fork the currency to so the hacker wouldn't get all the funds. It was basically, people didn't want to lose their money to a hacker, so they decided to hard fork the currency. Everything seemed to be fine, but now we end up with two currencies because people started, especially I think maybe people supported by the hacker, started supporting the original chain. So now we have two currencies in the market, Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. And it's causing a lot of confusion. There's a lot of stuff going on in that market right now, but hard forks ever since that point for Bitcoin are like, okay, maybe we shouldn't even think about doing a hard fork to 2 megabytes because look at what happened to Ethereum. So it's sort of a case study. CPU optimization. Again, as I talked about, ASICs crashing down to 16 nanometer. As in terms of the software, libsecp 256K1, that's how they process the signatures in Bitcoin transactions, and that was rewritten fully. I think it was about a year ago they released that for a 5-fold signature validation speed. So again, you can, by optimizing your software, you can virtually make the system faster. SegWit, which we'll be talking about a little more later, it goes from making it quadratic to a linear scaling of signature hashing operations. So again, if we went from a block size of 1 megabyte to 2 megabyte, that would have resulted in 4 times the signature operations. It's not a linear scaling. With SegWit, which again we'll talk about a little bit, you go to linear scaling. So it's even. It doesn't ramp up the bigger you get. It also limits the effects of maliciously designed transactions designed to just spin your CPU and not do anything for a long time. RAM optimization, the unspent transaction output set, I talked about that earlier, needs to be held in RAM. About 42 million outputs. SegWit is interesting, in addition to its other things, which we'll talk about, provides an incentive to reduce future expansion by favoring UTXO-friendly transactions. So any transaction that takes multiple outputs and combines them into one, like consolidates it, makes it smaller, will have a financial benefit to running those under SegWit. So that's kind of an interesting thing. This is the size of the UTXO set in memory, and this is October 1st. You can barely see it. I think it's 1.5 gigabytes in memory that this set needs to hold in RAM. Disk optimization, SegWit, it separates the one-time use verification signatures out from the blockchain transactions, thus reducing past and future disk requirements. So that's fascinating that we can make a software change which not only reduces future disk requirements, but also reduces the past as well. And this slide will show when SegWit is basically it's short for segregated witness, and it takes a lot of the stuff that's not needed in the blockchain and segregates it out. So we have a virtual block size that gets larger. We can fit more transactions in because we're optimizing. So this is the size of the blockchain with and without segregated witness, and you can see here, it also, although it's still growing, it saves a lot of space on the blockchain. And again, when you have a smaller blockchain, you're not waiting days to download it, you're waiting hours. Okay? It encourages more people to run nodes. Network optimization. A lot of stuff in here because the block size issue is the biggest one. That's the most centralizing tendency. Compact block relay, BIP 152, reduces the amount of data required to transmit full blocks. Okay, so that is just an optimization within the block. Fast relay network, I talked about before. It's like a dedicated network between mining farms. SegWit separates out the signature data, which is no longer needed for historical purposes. That results in a 60-100% block capacity improvement. And Schnorr signatures, which is something a little bit relatively new, talked about in the past year. It combines multiple input signatures into one. So if there's a lot of multi-sig transactions, which are becoming more popular with complex contract type transactions in Bitcoin, this helps because it turns a lot of signatures into one. So it makes the transaction size smaller. You can fit more transactions in a block. Okay, that was a lot. So that was talking about the on-blockchain scaling, which is the optimization of the current network as it stands. And now we're going to step back a little bit and talk about off-blockchain scaling. And I specifically want to talk about something which is very interesting to me, is Bitcoin bearer instruments. This is a Bitcoin bearer instrument, all right? This is the public address, and right here is the private key, which I made really small, so it's hard to read and copy down, right? Because what happens if you have the private key, that's all the Bitcoin address is, the public key and a private key. If you have the private key, if you have the password, you can spend whatever funds are locked in this account, right, or in this public address. So the private key is it's just a string of text that you need to keep secret. And this is why all these exchanges keep getting hacked, is because it's hard to keep things secret. I didn't keep it very secret though, so this is a very insecure system. But what this is a Bitcoin blockchain bearer certificate, which I've now passed to you. Since it's a bearer certificate, you own what's in that address, right? And if you pass it along, you own it now because you're bearing that. You have the private address, and you just pass it around so everybody can see it. But we don't need to do anything with a computer to pass Bitcoin around. That's what we're doing right now. We're passing that piece of paper around the table because all it is a private key. Okay? So we have 5 transactions already in the space of 30 seconds. 5 Bitcoin transactions. We're a third of the way around the table, and we haven't done anything with a Bitcoin block. We have done nothing with data. All right?
Where's my pizza?
That's 10,000 Bitcoin. That's last I checked. So the problem with this, though, is pretty obvious. Like, if I took a picture of that private key, or if I just memorized it, right, I can go later and take those funds. So it's really not a bearer instrument, because it's not like a dollar bill where if I remember the serial number in the dollar bill, I can go spend that later after giving it to you. That's basically what that is. So although it's a bearer instrument, it's very insecure, and I wouldn't use it for anything other than a demo. I think there's like 40 cents on there. So if anyone wants to sweep it, go ahead and take a picture of the private key and sweep it later. This is interesting. This is OpenDime, which is a company that is making these little USB sticks, and I'll pass these around too, which is similar to this piece of paper. But what you do with these is you initialize them, and it dynamically creates a private key within this little device. You plug it into the computer, obviously. Dynamically creates a private key. It doesn't show you the private key, though. It'll show you the public key. You can send funds to the public address, the public key. And so the funds, they don't really exist on the device. We're getting into technical details of how it works. But basically, the funds would be on this device, okay? So then, if I pass this to you, you can pass that around. So now you would have the funds that are on that device, all right? And pass it around the table and just have everyone take a quick look at it. That is a bearer instrument that is much more secure than the piece of paper that just went all the way around the table, because I didn't know the private key. I was able to send funds to it, but I don't know what the private key is on there, right? Well, what's the obvious problem with that? Well, the Bitcoin are locked in there forever, right? So no one can spend the money. How worthwhile is that? If you take a look, and over here, when you get it, you can take a look at this, but there is there's a little tab built into this, a physical tab. This is like a tamper evident tab. If you want to spend the funds that are located on this, you just pop that tab open, plug it into the computer, and it'll show you the private key. Okay? So this is basically a trustless way of transacting with Bitcoin, where you know I can't take the funds because you can look at it and say, oh, it hasn't been popped yet. So if the funds are good, I can plug this into the computer and look it up on the blockchain and see how much is in there to verify he's telling me it's the right amount. But once I know that, you can pass it around, and no one can redeem this until they pop this. So it's sort of a fascinating way that they did this, and I'd like to actually do a demo. This is uninitialized, and I'll show you how this works. Okay, so I plug it in, and you can see it right here. It's flashing green, and we've got a flashing red light too, okay? So then if I open this, you can all see this, right? All it has, there's not a lot of storage on here. All it has is index.html. All right, yeah, we agreed on terms of service. Your open DIME is new and unused. Follow these steps to pick a private key by using OpenDIME, blah, blah, blah. Open it, basically, and copy files onto this, okay? So I'm going to take some files. I'm going to take some random files that Dara downloaded earlier, and I'm going to drop them on here, okay? What it did is it took that information from those random files and generated a random private key for that. So now I reload the page. Oh, I think I need to put more on there. Yeah, need some more info. But it's basically using those as a random seed.
Is that 256 kilobits?
Is that what it is?
Kilobytes, yeah.
They say put photos on here. Let me see if I can.
Those are small.
Oh yeah, those are tiny. There we go.
There you go.
Of course, the Bill Gates syndrome.
Right. Demos are great for.
Where's that other one?
Oh, the one going around?
Yeah, let's try that one. Copy file. Oh, you know what? This one might already be nationalized. All right. Well, that's a bummer. Okay, so here is what happens. This one's already initialized. So you drop files on here, it generates a private key, and it shows you the public key, right? And then you can check this on the. This doesn't have anything. Let me try to send something to it.
How much do those checks go for the?
These are $12 a piece, and they're low volume, but obviously they're hoping
I
if
think
the.
they're less than that.
Are they less than that
I
now?
think they-
These are 12 when I bought them like a month and a half ago.
I just bought 3. I don't think they were that much, but we can check.
Okay.
Did you pay them in Bitcoin?
Yeah.
No. Okay, so I'm going to take a picture of this, and I'm going to send 0.01 Bitcoin. Okay, so I just sent it. Let's see if it shows up here. There we go.
There you go.
Sent 10,000 bits to it. Okay. So there's 10,000 bits on. How much is that now?
$4. Wow.
Yeah.
The certificate was 1,000 bits, was 40 cents.
Yeah. And you can. This is not just this web page. It'll show you on the Bitcoin block and like blockchain.info. That's where it's gone. And so in a matter of a few minutes, I put money on here. And now I can pass it around. Did you come up with a question? Trivia question?
No, not yet.
Who can name two people that are thought to possibly be Satoshi Nakamoto? 2 people. One speaker.
The Australian, but I don't remember his name.
Oh, what? Who said Fred Wright?
Fred Wright.
Name another one. No?
Gavin.
All right, I'll accept that. I'll mix
Oh, there you go.
There you
Or
go.
the other guy.
Or the other guy. Or the team at the NSA. Or, yeah. Nobody knows. Alien technology.
Trump.
Somehow, I think we can rule him out. Okay. All right, congratulations. Good job.
All right.
Where do I get this?
Yeah, that's serious. That's a giveaway. This is the interactive portion of the presentation. Okay. So, what this past thing was all about off-blockchain transactions. Okay, we were passing it around physically. That doesn't hit the network, that doesn't impact the block size. So, is there a way to do off-blockchain transactions but still online so we don't have to physically pass around pieces? And that's all what the Lightning Network is about, which is why I want to spend a little bit of time on the Lightning Network because it's pretty exciting. But first, a little segue. Brief history of Ethernet, very brief. So, who remembers this yellow cable in this room? Anybody? Yeah. All right, this is an original Ethernet cable. And it was just a cable. That's all it was. About the diameter of your thumb, yellow, always yellow for some reason. And what this is how you would connect into the network. It's called a vampire tap. You would take it, this transceiver, and it had two fangs, metal fangs, where you would jam it onto the cable, right, and screw it in, and that's how it would cut through the sheath and touch the metal on the inside and connect to the cable. It's a vampire tap. And this, huge RS-232 or parallel port or whatever it is would connect up to your gateway 386SX and get you on the 10 megabyte or megabit network at your office back in 1994. So what this was a shared medium. Okay, everyone on the Ethernet network was using that network as a shared environment. To give you a little bit of an idea of what that was like, it would be if you lived in a neighborhood where you had no telephone system, and to talk to your neighbor you'd have to go out on your porch and yell across the street to your neighbor, okay? So yeah, that's fine, it works. Your voice might get a little hoarse, but the problem is that if everybody's out on their porch yelling to their neighbor, sometimes you can talk over each other, and neither of you can hear what's going on. That's what would happen on these original Ethernet networks. It's called CSMA-CD, Collision Sense Multiple Access Collision Detect, which is a lot of words for basically two people talking at once. Would cause a jam on the network. So the way it worked is you'd start talking to whoever you wanted to talk to on the network, and then you'd stop talking and you'd listen. You'd listen for a jam signal, because the network would sense if there was two people talking at once, it would send out a jam signal. So you had to talk and then listen for a jam signal. Okay, no jam signal. Keep talking. Listen. Talk. Listen. Okay? So these networks couldn't scale very well because you had to constantly stop and listen for a certain amount of time to hear if there was a jam signal coming through. All right? And so this resulted in all these rules of networking and designing Ethernet networks, where it was a 5-4-3 rule was the big one, where you have maximum length of 100 meters, and you have 5 segments total, 4 of them, 4 repeating devices in the middle, and 3 of them could be populated by workstations. The rest of them have to be hub to hub. And the reason for this was this listening, is you couldn't transmit constantly. You had to constantly listen for these jams, and it couldn't be too far away from end to end of the entire network because of the speed of light. All right, you had to make the network small so that you could hear the jams. Otherwise, if you made the network larger, you could send less data because you just have to talk really quickly and then listen for a really long time to hear the echo. Okay, so this was a shared medium where there was limitations that caused you to have these design principles which made the network relatively small. So to get around this, what they turned away from was the shared Ethernet concept, which some of you may have still. Or the little blue hubs, Netgear. The Netgear hubs, Ethernet hubs, maybe in your basement you have some. They started changing it over to switching. So they took the dumb hubs that connected the devices and they put a little smarts in it and called it a switch. So the smarts are, it would get a signal and say, oh, I don't have to broadcast this to everyone. I know who he's talking to. He's talking to this other port. I'll send it up just on that port. Okay, so we turned it from hubs to switches. And what this did, and also we did full duplexing, which means that even if the switch and the computer were talking, they did it on different channels. There was no chance of them interrupting each other. So full duplex switched Ethernet, which I still use to this day, is deterministic, no possibility of collisions, so you can get very high speed. Because what did you have if you had everybody constantly screaming across the street to each other? Nobody could talk to each other. The network would jam up and slow down and nobody could get their information through. Alright, so with that little segue, let's talk about the Bitcoin block. As we talked about before, the block size is 1 megabyte currently. It may not change in the next few years. Who knows? We'll see. But this is a shared medium, much like an Ethernet network of 1993. Okay? Everybody uses this resource to make their transactions. Is there a way that we could do something to take a slice of a Bitcoin block and virtually make it a dedicated block with no size or time limitations to it? Okay, so this is very similar to turning a shared Ethernet network into a switched Ethernet network. You have a dedicated channel that you could talk to everybody, to other people, where you wouldn't be interrupting anybody else. And this is sort of what the magic of the Lightning Network can do. It's a meta layer on top of the Bitcoin network. It uses standard Bitcoin transactions. It's not a different type of system. And it creates P2P channels between Bitcoin network participants, allowing for virtually unlimited off-chain transactions. It requires 2 on-Bitcoin blockchain transactions only, one to open a channel and one to close. Okay. So, January 2017, you do an opening transaction to open this channel, and then you can do all kinds of transactions between those two parties. And then 2 years later, you decide, okay, well, we're done. We close it up. 2 transactions on the Bitcoin network for all this bandwidth of transactions offline. So it's similar to me putting money on that open dime. That was one transaction on the network. Giving it to you, maybe you give it to your Uber driver later, maybe he gives it to somebody later, you know, and someone finally, 2 years later, figures out, oh, I know how to redeem this, because no one else does. They just keep passing it around. Goes on the network and sweeps the funds, right? That's on-ramp and off-ramp. 2 transactions in the Bitcoin network, but transferring value offline. Very similar to what the Lightning Network would do. So what does this do? This is fascinating. It turns the Bitcoin blockchain not into a payment system, but a public payment channel registry. So you register which channels you have on the Bitcoin blockchain instead of making transactions to other people. I know, it's 2 years ago, who would have thought? Yeah, this would have been witchcraft, but it's actually just clever use of Bitcoin's simple smart contracting abilities, which is pretty insane because nobody thinks of Bitcoin as a smart contracting platform. That's more like the Ethereum game. Show us how it works. Okay, both parties create a transaction crediting funds to a shared P2SH multi-sig address on the public blockchain. Each party creates a secret and hashes it. Each party creates an off-chain hash and an op-CSV check sequence verify time lag commitment. Transaction exchanges it with the other party. Both parties broadcast the opening transaction, but keep the commitment transaction unbroadcast. Key part. Both parties can then update the commitment transaction, assigning different values back and forth indefinitely, providing the hash secret to the prior, now invalid transaction, thus preventing cheating. Yeah, that's a lot. Okay, so now we're going to take a pause for a real-life demo. All right. Who watches Broad City on Comedy Central? Anybody? Nobody? Nobody watches Broad City. Oh, it's funny. Okay. So it's kind of like a millennial version of Sex and the City, but they're poor and they smoke reefer all the time. But anyway, it's Comedy Central. Check it out. So we need 2 volunteers to be Abby and Alana. These are the 2 main characters in Broad City. And I know they're women, but it doesn't matter. Who wants to? Okay, come on up. You don't have to do anything, just stand here. All right. Here you go. Here's some dirty fiat money. So, Abby and Alana, all right. Nobody watches the show, but anyway, Abby's the responsible one. Alana's the one who's constantly getting into trouble. Alana's gotten fired from one of her latest temp gigs. Okay, so she wants to move in with Abby. So they decide they're going to live together, and they're going to open a joint checking account. Okay, the Bank of Bitcoin. All right. So basically, you got your $10. You got your $10. Put that in the Bank of Bitcoin checking account. All right. Cool. So now, let's say that Alana's sitting around the apartment. She doesn't have a job. So she said, I'm going to clean the apartment. So Abby gets home and says, oh, that's great that you cleaned the apartment. She kind of feels bad because Alana's not doing anything. She can't find a job. All right, I'll give you $5 for cleaning up the apartment. Okay, so what they do is they're not going to do the easy thing of just giving cash or an IOU. We're going to do the hard thing because we're doing something here. So what we're going to do is, this is their checking account that they opened. Abby's going to write 2 checks. All right? She's going to write 1 check to herself for $5. All right? And then she's going to write a check to Alana for $15. Okay, so they both contributed 10 to the joint checking account. Abby wants to give Alana 5. So this reflects their current state. Alana gets $15, Abby gets $5. Okay? Now this, you notice these are special checks. They close the account completely. So this is not an ongoing thing. They're going to close the account. Also, Abby's going to come up with an answer to a secret question. Okay? And have this as part of these set of 2 checks. Alana is going to do the exact same thing, but in reverse. She's going to write a check to herself for $15, and then she's going to write a check to Abby for $5 and sign that. And of course, these are joint checking accounts, so you both need to sign to cash these. Okay? And then she's also going to come up with an answer to a secret question and provide that with the checks. All right? So you're Abby, you're Alana. You wrote this up. Now, please exchange those. You're going to exchange those. So now, if they get into a fight and they decide they don't want to live together anymore, right? What's going to happen? Either one of them, that's right, we need to listen. Either one of them can go to the bank and present these checks, sign their half of it, right? You've got Alana's signature on there, so you can go ahead and sign Abby on there, go to the bank and redeem those. And if Abby does it, she would get her $5 immediately. And since it's closing the account, she has to do something with the other $15. So they would hold the $15 for Alana to come pick up later. They would notify her that the account's closed, come get your cash. If Alana did it, same thing. She would get her money immediately, and Abby would have to go pick it up later. Okay. So let's say, but they don't want to do this because they're living together. They know they're going to transact back and forth. So they don't want to close the account. So basically, they're just exchanging these pieces of paper as a proof, like, okay, if something were to happen, this is the state of our financial relationship. And either of us can sever it at any time. So they decide, let's say a couple days later, Alana's like, I'm going to take that $5 that I got, and I'm going to buy one of Abby paints. So I'm going to buy one of Abby's paintings. Abby, I want to give you that I want to give you back that $5 for that painting. Abby's like, cool. All right. So now, this state of their relationship, where Alana has 15 and Abby has 5, is invalid. Okay? So they trash these, and then they also give the answer to these, or the question to these answers to each other as part of trashing these. Okay? And by the way, if does anybody remember this?
Yeah.
Who else is old like me? Karnak the Magnificent deducing a private key from a public address. Okay. So he would basically do this. He'd provide the answer and then deduce the question by holding it up his mind. And okay, sis boom ba. Sis boom ba. Let's see here. Of course, I'm not Karnak, so I can't deduce it, I have to read it. Sis boom ba. Describe the sound made when a sheep explodes. Alright, yes, good writers, got some laughs, okay. And the other answer was Gungadin. Gungadin. What do you hear when you put an amplifier in your gunga? I know, they're... It was funny in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was 80s humor. Okay. So anyway, back to Bitcoin, or Lightning Network, or whatever we're doing right here, checking account, Bitcoin checking account. So this is invalid. So they give the questions to each other, and they trash these. And they write up a new set. But we're going back to the original set. Abby gets $10, and Alana gets $10, okay? One thing I forgot to mention originally is that these are sort of special checks. They have some magical properties to them. Well, not so magical. If Alana takes this to the bank and tries to cash it, the bank's going to say, oh, okay, yeah, you can have your money, but you have to wait a week. So come back in a week and you have your money. It's important. I forgot to mention that earlier. So they write up a new set of these, or each gets $10, and they exchange them, and they come up with new answers to secret questions, right? And now they're back to their original state of each has 10. But again, they don't cash them in because they don't want to close the account. So they just give that to each other as proof that that's what's going on. But Alana, you know, she's kind of sneaky. It's like, wait a minute. She goes into the trash. She goes, I still have these checks. I'm gonna see what I can do. I'm gonna see if I can get the $15 because I have her painting, which I supposedly paid $5 for. But I'm gonna go to the bank. I'm gonna cut out of town. I'm gonna close the account and I'm gonna get my money. So she goes to the bank and she submits it, and she submits the check for Abby, and they say, okay, account's closed. Abby's gonna get $5, and then Alana, yeah, you get 15. Oh, but you have to wait a week. You have to wait a week. So come back in a week. Alana's like, well, I didn't really think about that, but okay, I'll come back in a week. In the meantime, Abby, you get an email that your account's closed, and come pick up your $5. Like, whoa, what happened here? What's going on? I didn't close the account. What's going on? We didn't do anything like that. So you realize that Alana closed the account on you, right? There's another magical property with this check that Alana had for getting her $15. In addition to waiting a week, not only could Alana cash the check, but Abby could cash it if she had the question to the answer. Okay? So as part of invalidating this original set of checks, you exchange the questions to your secret answers. So Abby marches into the bank with her question that Alana revealed to her when they supposedly trashed these, and she says, hey, I've got the question. Give me the $15. So not only does Abby get her $5 back, but she gets Alana's $15 as well. She gets the whole thing because Alana tried to cheat. Okay? This is basically how the Lightning Network works. All right? It just uses a few interesting properties of cryptographic transactions in the Bitcoin network with time delays and multisig to make this happen with these sort of magical checks. But this is as close as I could do it to real life. It doesn't exactly apply, but it's good enough to get the concept. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I practiced this because I kept forgetting it myself. And I'm like, wait, what? Who does what? I had to do this like 5 times. Thank God I didn't mess anything up. Okay. Thank you for your assistance. So building out the Lightning Network. It uses the building blocks of the hash. The hash is basically the Karnak secret and secret question and answer. And a time lock, basically a delay on when you can redeem your money to allow the network chains of transactions. So basically we had 2 people transacting right here, but you could make it 3 people, 4 people, 5 people. You would just have to make the time locks decrement along the chain. So maybe it would be 7 days for this person, 6 for this, 5 for this, 4 for this, 3. And you could pull money along the chain in an untrusted environment. And that's basically what the Lightning Network is. And it's kind of amazing. And it blows your mind when you think about this. This could actually happen off chain. You're just exchanging pieces of paper basically. It's nothing real. All right. So it's all about layers now. Ethernet, we have on the bottom Ethernet, that's like the physical layer. IP, Internet Protocol, that's the networking layer. TCP is getting close to applications, transmission control protocol. And then you have applications on top. In Bitcoin, we have the blockchain. And now we're having Lightning, it's the second layer on top. And we have wallets up here, but then we have this, what's that? Chasm. That's just a kick-ass name that I came up with, right? That's for, that is chain, I forgot what it is now. I'll come back to that later. Okay, so future Internet of Money. So basically we have, this is also interesting because the Lightning Network allows cross-chain, that's what it is. Chasm, cross-chain atomic swap mechanism. Okay, so you can basically do Bitcoin blockchain, Lightning for Bitcoin, and then Chasm to transmit it to a different blockchain entirely. Ethereum, Litecoin, anything where they have, where they can talk with a similar type of hashing. It doesn't even have to be the same consensus mechanism at the bottom. And this is all, because this is Lightning Network, it's instantaneous as well. So this is possibly, you know, Andreas Antonopoulos talks about the Internet of Money. This could possibly be a future Internet of Money. You have different blockchains with different Lightning networks, all talking to each other with these kind of chasm nodes, right, that are communicating across using the Lightning Network. So they're still untrusted nodes, or you can do it in a trustless manner, but instantaneously. Don't have to even wait for confirmations on the blockchain. This can do amazing things for exchanges. You don't have to give your money to Kraken or an exchange that gets hacked later and takes it. So it's kind of some fascinating stuff going on. Final main ramblings. Connect to your nearest BitPay Lightning node. So maybe BitPay will start Lightning node service. Right? Circle channel management services. You know, you're not going to want to manage all of your Lightning network channels. Most people probably aren't, so they outsource that to someone. So someone's got to step in to do a channel management service. Fractional reserve Lightning. Now remember, when you guys open the checking account, you have to contribute value to it. You have to put money in with the opening blockchain transaction. All right. If I'm paying somebody, if I'm paying Comcast my monthly bill, I mean, I don't want to, you know, open a 1-year push channel and put $1,000 in and then just slowly pay them each month, you know, $100, because that's like the time value of money. I don't want to just have it sit there and do nothing. So someone who's providing channel management services might loan you Bitcoin or front the Bitcoin on the Lightning Network for you to pay, and then you pay them later. Lightning Network nodes would charge a fee. They got to make money from this somehow. They'd be a lot less than blockchain fees, and they would be a lot faster. So that would be a no-brainer. But maybe there'd be no free nodes or negative fees, okay? Because you have to have liquidity at each side of a channel. You know, a certain balance, so that if stuff comes in one side, it can reach the other. If a node provider gets low on a balance on one side and high on this side, they might encourage transactions to come the other way to replenish by having negative fees. So you can actually make money by routing your payments for a particular channel in the Lightning Network. So these are all kind of mind-blowing concepts in terms of money transmission. And this is sort of the last slide. This may be something you'll see on your iPad or your phone in 5 or 6 years. Yes, something like StreamPay. These are all your channels that you're connected to, whether it's push or pull. You know, maybe your bit wage would come in via a pull. That's how you get your income. And this is all per second. Satoshis per second. You're paying your bills, your Comcast bill, your People's Gas bill per second, right? So what does that do? The people that get the money, they like to know that you're still around and you're not going to stiff them with next month's bill. But if they know that you're up to the last second you've paid your bill up to the month, they know you're not going anywhere. That reduces their risk of bad debts, right? So they would give you a discount on your bill to provide it via StreamPay or something like this, or through a Lightning Network transaction. And again, the other way works too. How would you like to get your wages on a per second basis as opposed to 2 checks a month, or every second week? How do you do budgeting in this environment? It's budgeting by the second. There's no more monthly budgeting with Excel spreadsheets. And someone would take care of this for you too. If you're running low on a particular push channel or something, you get notified. But this is budgeting on a per second basis. So at all points in time, that you're doing okay, or you need to take care of something. So this is just kind of my concept of what could possibly happen in a few years with the possibility of Lightning Network and microtransactions.
With a channel violation example, what were you envisioning there?
That would be like, Ilana took the checks and tried to close the channel. It was like, okay, channel violation, now you gotta do something. If you want to steal the funds back, or you want to do like an arbitration out of band, or you want to sue them in like a real court, So, just something like that. So, this is fascinating stuff that this opens up, and that's all I got. Thank you. Questions or discussion? I didn't talk about some things, like side chains and drag chains, because there's so much stuff going on out there, and I just can't fit all of it in my head. So that's why we need other people. Yes? Sir, what was your name, sir?
Kurt.
Kurt, yes.
Probably a dumb question, but I sort of understand how the Lightning Network can do system types of things, but can it really replace? Most transactions aren't going to fit into that model, are they?
It's a good question. We don't know, and that's some of the people are bringing up these questions as part of the scaling conference too. There's a lot of unknowns about the Lightning Network, but what this would be is not you opening a channel with every single person you want to pay. This would be Lightning node aggregators, like a payment service provider, that you would connect. You would open one channel to them, and then they would take care of paying your different vendors or people you owe money to. You would direct those channels.
More than speeding up current use, it creates ways that new uses can be added on.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, the staccato of all technology just increases the staccato of things. So if you have a small
Not particularly sophisticated, but can I ask you another question?
Sure.
It seems that these blockchains have to grow with, at each passing year, and at some point they have to grow too large to be manageable. So,
Speak
what
to that.
happens?
Yeah. I'm going to steal from Andreas because he's talked about this, where it's Bitcoin every year. I'll just quote him directly. It fails to scale every year gracefully. Right? So failing to scale is not an endpoint where it's degraded until there are fixes put in place, and then every year it opens up more and more services.
It doesn't sound like a very safe place to put billions of dollars, though, does it?
We've been saying the same kind of thing about the internet running out of IP addresses for 15 years,
Yeah.
and it didn't.
It's because you do a linear projection, and usually life doesn't work that way. Something intervenes to turn it into a wave function instead of a linear, like a Malthusian sort of exhaustion of resources or peak oil or things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense for hobbyists to be doing it. If you're going to put a nation's economy, base a nation's economy on technology, that you're hoping Moore's Law will sustain itself.
Well,
Some version of Moore's Law.
The people who came up with the Lightning Network have done projections on if every person on Earth did, 100 transactions, how would that? It's terabytes of block sizes, on a daily basis. So that's obviously unsustainable in the current environment. Which is why these second layer models, which don't impact the blockchain, but for two transactions, one opening and one closing maybe years later, are very exciting, because again, it's all like we did person-to-person exchanges, which don't impact the shared resources. So that, the tragedy of the commons can sort of avoid that with these, or at least minimize the impact. But again, it may not all be Bitcoin either. You may have other blockchains. So
still
you can spread
same
out,
problem.
yeah,
The
exactly.
blockchain is gonna inexorably grow
Mhm.
and it needs to be made. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you for
it-
answering my question.
No, it is interesting, and there could be other blockchain designs, for example, which have like a tank tread model, which are rolling. They prune old stuff, which is no longer needed, and so it's just a continually rotating out, like log files on a server system. You don't want to keep log files for years. You prune them out, so it's only 30 days.
That
or a
doesn't
year.
exist, it's something that could be put into existence.
It could be put into existence in a new blockchain or coin, or it could be soft forked into Bitcoin, possibly. We don't know.
On top of that question, I have always wondered this: why do we need the entire blockchain? I feel like we have an endpoint with Bitcoin where everyone has however many Bitcoin they have, but then why do we need all of the old transactions? Why can't we just?
Well, we do need the unspent transaction output set, which is all the addresses that have Bitcoin that are available to be spent.
And some of them are in that old.
Because someone could come 10 years down, this is why Bitcoin is, you can store it, you could put it in a vault for 10 years, that open time, and come back 10 years later and it's still useful. You could still do something with it because no one deleted the fact that you have that money on the blockchain. So you do need, if you want full immutability and trustlessness, then when you download the blockchain, your computer will verify every signature from the Genesis block in January 2009. And that tells you, specifically, you're not trusting anyone. You know this is the actual Bitcoin blockchain, right?
Otherwise, it could be hacked.
Otherwise, you're
They can
trusting
change it, yeah.
somebody else. But yeah, the other coins, other coins have checkpoints. Okay.
Maybe like refreshes.
Well, they're like, you don't have to check all the way back to the beginning. We did a checkpoint here, and you can go here and about. But if you want to be really certain, which not everybody does, but really certain that you're dealing with the right blockchain, which is important if you're going to run $1 trillion economy on it, you need to go back to the Genesis block and verify everything when you initially download it. But,
With the streaming payment systems, it looks like some very interesting changes in banking laws or credit laws, or, if I'm doing micropayments on a streaming payment system, and then I pause something because it's gonna go to litigation, and that, because they still need to have me as a customer, but now, like, you stop the streaming, but you need laws and regulations on all that.
I think they exist already.
It looks like a massive education effort for legislators and policymakers and governments.
well, I'll tell you what a closer one is ICOs. Everything is about the ICO now, the initial coin offerings.
Oh.
Right? Okay, so these are bootstrapped coins, either on top of the Bitcoin network or separate coins entirely, where they come up with a cryptocurrency to fund a particular project. Zero coin? Is that the Zero Cash? Which is the Zuku one? That's just
Zcash? Yeah.
Zcash. Zcash. That's something where there's a lot of excitement about that. And that's how they raise money to pay the developers to get this thing off the ground and support it, is you do an initial coin offering. Are these securities? Is the SEC watching this? A lot of these coins, they go to other countries to perform these initial coin offerings, but people in the US are buying into them through the Bitcoin network. They're using their Bitcoin to get into these ICOs. These are basically IPOs, but they are not regulated at all. And there's a lot of concern that people are opening themselves to legal liability by doing these ICOs.
I might be able to answer that. I'm a lawyer.
Okay.
There are areas where this law is missing, but pretty much the existing law does cover pretty much everything, including and people may be violating it.
Right. It may fall under existing laws. They don't need new laws. I don't think the SEC is really looking into it though, to try to prosecute people. But it is a possibility, especially when you have
cases.
What's that?
There are cases out there.
Well, especially when you have something that completely collapses because a hacker steals all the funds. There's going to be a lot of angry people, and they're going to get their lawyers involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I'm middle-aged, so I'm an old fogey on one hand, but then I try to keep my brain young on the other one. My old fogey brain says, "Oh, they've never been able to do this. This is illegal. They're going to come in and shut this down." And then the young side of me is like, no, this is too useful and there'd be too many good use cases for it that they can't I mean, if your kid in 10 years is an 8th grader and they can do an ICO coin on their phone at school, is that considered an IPO? Are you offering stock and, you know, making your own coin and having your friends buy into it?
I can give you a very succinct definition.
Yeah.
When someone gives money to someone else, expecting to make money back
Yeah.
by that person's efforts, that's a security.
Okay.
And there's a famous case where membership to a golf club is considered a security. It could not be a security, or it could be a security, but if you're buying the membership with intention of flipping it for more money later, then it's a security.
Okay. So,
Case law.
Huh?
Case law, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's so old, it's, I mean, it's the law. That's very clear law.
so let's say in the year 2027, you have, you know, again, 7th, 8th graders issuing coins as part of their reputation, and their friends buy into it. It's like a Facebook thing, right? Their friends buy into this IPO, initial person offering. I don't know.
Reputation market.
Yeah, sort of like that. It would be considered
Well, are
a
they gonna
security
make-
if people
Are
wanted
the
to.
investors going to make money because of someone else's effort?
I don't know if there'd be effort involved, though. It's all reputation. It'd be interesting.
I think if they're going to make money
Yeah.
because of what someone else
So
does or
it's
doesn't
Bitcoin
do,
money.
that's a security.
And in the weeds now.
How do they fund the ICOs? Like, because if you, like, I understand with Bitcoin, like, there's an established history that's sort of developed over time, but it emerged as like the success of all the cryptocurrencies. So like, it's people who trust it. Like, it's in effect backed by electricity because that's what the mining is done with. So like, it's almost like a commodity the way it trades. But with like these ICOs that are for companies, how do they capitalize that? Like, where's the backing for that? Like, is it tied? Like, are they basically saying like it's tied to a percent in the company with that, and then like the reward for mining is a percent in the company, or how do they, or is it Bitcoin? How do they do that? Like, how do they fund, like, put value behind that?
Right. There is no actual value behind it other than the faith that you have that they're going to make that currency valuable. In the case of Zcash, it's about being private, whereas Zcash is completely private transactions, unlike Bitcoin where everything's on the public blockchain. So a lot of people have bought into Zcash because they think that's going to be important, the privacy aspect of it, which is a unique feature of that coin versus Bitcoin.
So what do they give to what do the initial people
Right.
give?
You would usually it's Bitcoin. They use
Yeah.
Bitcoin. So you have a Bitcoin account
Yeah.
at an exchange, and you send Bitcoin through the exchange to
get
this other
Zcoin.
coin, right? So you basically cash out of Bitcoin and buy like Zcoin or Zcash.
Or else you mine it.
Or you can mine it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
But you can mine the Zcoin.
Not yet, but people are trying to figure out how to do that. They're really excited about it because they think it's going to be quite valuable. I think Zcash futures is like $105 or something. I can't remember, but anyway, yeah. So yeah, if you have a GPU miner, you can figure out how to mine some of these. I don't know about Zcash, but some of these other coins that are being offered. We used to call them altcoins, but now they call them app coins, right?
App coins, yeah,
Mhm.
changing or DApp.
But I think that means because it used to be a couple of years ago, everybody was coming out of the woodwork and creating these altcoins, which were forks of Bitcoin, and many of them were scams. There was one called Zeta Coin that scammed a lot of people, maybe me too, out of some money. And they claimed that Zeta Coin was going to be associated with a new M-Pesa kind of a cryptocurrency application in Kenya, and it was going to be worth all this money, and it's crazy. And then someone, took it and ran. It was pre-mined. A lot of it was pre-mined, but
Scam coins.
Scam coins.
Scam coin. Shit
Yeah.
coins.
Yeah, I've got a client, it's a local company, and they're about, it has one of about 5 or 6 licenses by the SEC, where it's, you can crowdfund equity, and they could handle one of these things quite easily. And it would be clearly legal.
Yeah, yes,
clearly in compliance with.
it's an evolving.
I don't think a lot of people take the time to do
No.
that. I think it's a Wild West sort of
Sure.
mentality still.
But it always ends up getting civilized,
Oh, yeah.
sooner or later.
Yeah.
Sooner or later. Any other questions? All right. Let's wrap it up.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks.